Tim Burton. When this director's name comes to mind, crazy and wacky films aren't hard to find. From the likes of Beetlejuice, Alice in Wonderland, Ed Wood, and a plethora of other strange films he's made in his 40-year-long career, Burton has become a staple of anything bizarre and haunting. But what influenced Tim Burton to create dark yet intriguing films? How does he bring out the beauty in horrifying ideas? All these questions and more will be answered shortly. Welcome to the surreal world of Tim Burton. From the 1910s to the 1930s, German Expressionism rose to prominence in the art community due to the atmosphere created by World War I and II. During this time period, the German government banned all foreign films, and German filmmakers went from creating 24 films a year to about 130. The demand for movies was at an all-time high, and instead of creating romanticized films akin to Western audiences, filmmakers were able to capture the pure emotion during Germany's most trying time in history. Violence was rampant in the streets, people were suicidal and depressed, and death was prevalent in their world. Art imitates life, but at times their art was prophetic, showing the potential horrors that would become of them in World War II. The likes of German Expressionism heavily influenced the noir genre of filmmaking, where detectives would follow a trail of blood and deceit. It also influenced anything horror-related. Sorry, I just had to emphasize the effect that German Expressionism had on filmmakers during the 1940s. So how did this influence Burton? Throughout his life, Tim Burton was fascinated by anything horror-related, and if you add in some Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, and Ed Wood, you've got the biggest influences on Burton. By utilizing the themes of betrayal from the Cabinet of Caligari, the haunting atmosphere of Nosferatu, and the transhuman nature of Metropolis, Tim Burton created 3 distinct short and feature-length films, emphasizing each theme illustrated by German Expressionism. We shall now take a look at The Doctor of Doom. This was not Burton's first short film. The Doctor of Doom is one of the prime examples of German Expressionism in his short films. This movie is a short remake of the 1963 Mexican movie of the same name. However, it's got a weird, unique humor to it. Despite being riddled with issues from a technical standpoint, all actors were ADR'd. No one knew how to eat a taco, and why the fuck did they sound like Herbert Morrison on speed?
Roger, buddy, but wait, I'm getting off the subject of the destruction of your soul, which I will ruthlessly rule over tomorrow. Remind me once again of my tortured childhood when I was forced to be an organ grinder's monkey and do humiliating dances against my will.
It's as if whoever did the ADR started at least 3 lines of crack before reading off the script. Sorry for being distracted, but these technical errors make the film hard to watch at times. However, that doesn't mean we can't see the German Expressionist style in this film. The Doctor of Doom has several shots with harsh shadows and lighting. The castle set had a very bleak atmosphere. And finally, some shots were so dark the villain appears to be a silhouette on a white background. This wasn't a complete crapshoot because I believe Burton purposely made this film to be as cliché as a 50s horror film can get. I do think Tim Burton did that on purpose since Ed Wood was one of his inspirations as a filmmaker. While watching Doctor of Doom, I noticed how the misunderstood kind inventor is a reoccurring archetype in Burton's films. Even though in this short, the inventor of the monster wants to destroy all beauty in life, for reasons. Something to do with incels or some shit, I don't know. More or less, I think this is where one of many character archetypes he created start to pop up in his career. I won't give a play-by-play of the film, because it's a fever dream and a have to watch. It's the most stereotypical, cliche B-movie horror schlock that still has traces of a budding filmmaker. On that note, we've reached Vincent, and this is where Burton shines as a director, nearly trademarking his unique style of stop-motion animation. The large, hollow, sunken eyes and elongated pale face would become a hallmark in any of Burton's stop-motion films. This short film is jam-packed with German Expressionism, and I'd have to make an entire video dedicated to just this one short. And, to keep things from going off the rails, I want to highlight how Vincent Price voiced the narrator, while Vincent Malloy wanted to become Vincent Price. There's too many damn Vincents in this essay, but got it. Anyways, from what I've read, Vincent Malloy is a projection of what Tim Burton wanted to be when he was a kid. He wanted to be Vincent Price, and by honing in and writing about how he was always different or strange to the other kids, over-dramatization of a 7-year-old's tormented soul, Burton was able to craft a poetic short film reminiscent of an Edgar Allan Poe short story. One of my favorite shots of the short film is where Burton was able to throw together a few seconds that were jam-packed to the brim of Malloy's insanity, along with the kid being scared shitless, which that's great too.
As he quoted The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe, "And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore."
While we see Vincent Malloy pretend to be an inventor of a zombie-like dog, Frankenweenie was able to bring that idea to life. I won't be discussing the feature-length film of the same name, but I will be talking about the short film made back in 1984 for Disney. This film holds a special place in my heart, and the reason why is because this is where Burton was able to first capture the beauty in horror. In the first 2 minutes, the dog dies. And that's the best way to grab your audience's attention. Despite knowing the dog will come back, a boy watching his dog get hit by a car is always sad. The boy Victor longs for his dog, and for a moment he has a spark of inspiration by realizing with enough electricity he could resurrect his dog. Burton's artistic style shines through with the constant lines of shadows being cast upon the character's face. The graveyard, the lab, the workout room, and the golf course all have this dreamlike quality that exudes the nature of German Expressionism. In the Cabinet of Caligari, this is where things become more dreamlike. The film is more strange, to say the least. And instead of having a monster hell-bent on destruction of the town or people, Frankenweenie is just a dog with no crazy plot twists or turns. However, Burton was able to show the grim reality of conformity in modern society. If you're strange, weird, or an outcast, then you either conform to the norm or kill the beast. This theme would also become relevant again in 3 of Burton's feature-length films. But before we talk about them, I want to discuss the ending of Frankenweenie. I won't spoil anything, but by realizing Sparky is a monster, the townsfolk are back to some form of normality. Burton even has a reference to Bride of Frankenstein. What a catch! Instead of chasing out and dismissing anyone who seems strange, society should be able to accept them for who they are. It may sound cliche, but feeling accepted by everyone is a struggle a lot of people have to overcome in life. Overall, 10 out of 10, watch these short films if you have the time. Now we shall bear witness to the themes of insanity in Tim Burton's first feature-length film, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Insane is putting it kinda lightly though, because Pee-wee's Big Adventure to me is when you're a hyper OCD fanatic that took one too many hits of acid. Don't ask me how I know that, but this film has a strange balance between quirky jokes and dark undertones. Pee-wee Herman throughout the film has a childlike mentality when trying to find his stolen bike, and the shenanigans he throws himself into are only the tip of the iceberg for what's in store. By the time we're a third into the movie, Pee-wee Herman's bike is missing, and he's walking the dark, rainy streets, casting a large shadow on the highway, scaring anyone that comes near him with a very reptilian hiss. Once inside the fortune teller's shop, a red glow emits all around them. This lighting of the color red has various meaning throughout the film, from love, violence, and mysteriousness, but the core meaning, in my opinion, is a very childlike view of the world. Enemies become friends, he's able to hitchhike with a convict, he's almost seduced by a waitress. I have no idea what that scene was about in the first place. So weird. Anyways, he somehow wound up in the Alamo by riding a train with a hobo who likes singing. The very extreme stories and mindset Pee-wee Herman has is interesting to say the least. By having that childlike wonder in the character of Pee-wee, Burton was able to craft a very Brechtian yet crazy world filled with characters you would have a drink with and not have the shit kicked out of you. I mean, just look at what he's wearing. If he wore that where I grew up, well, he would have been normal, but I would have kicked his ass. Okay! On a more serious note, let's take a look at the teenager that has scissors for hands. Meet Edward Scissorhands, a robotic, misunderstood teenager where he doesn't kill anyone until the very end of the film. Not much of a spoiler though, due to a very similar to the Beauty and Beast kind of story. Here, instead of the beast being a giant furry, we have a guy who can slice off someone's arm if he snaps. Besides the character with the same name as the title, the film itself goes from a quirky summer bash with the emo to existential ideas about what it means to be truly human. Then we go back to the teen rom-com where in the end they surprisingly don't get together. I won't spoil anything more if you haven't watched it yet. If I were able to put Edward Scissorhands on mute, I would still be able to follow the film due to the visuals Burton was able to put together. In each scene where the inventor, played by Vincent Price, is on screen, I personally always find it heartwarming. While scenes with the boyfriend and neighbors, later in the film, have more harsh shadows or symmetrical shots conveying the emotion of the characters. And that emotion is usually, I'm gonna freaking kill you, dude! I don't want to say the other word because I already said it once. Anyways, more often than not, Burton conveys a lot of Edward's emotions with various shots and compositions. For example, when Edward is walking down the hallway scraping his hands against the walls, this pretty much shows he's extremely angered with how the boyfriend treated him when he was around Kim. The shot says it all, and by using minimal dialogue between Edward and Kim throughout the film, there's a weird yet touching bond where they're, in a way, star-crossed lovers. And Burton was able to craft a visual story focused on showing the charm and what people perceive as a monster. Instead of using German Expressionism to make a creepy atmosphere and scare the audience, he used it to highlight the inherent beauty of an otherwise creepy teenager. Originally during production, Edward Scissorhands was going to be a musical. It wasn't until Caroline Thompson collaborated with Tim Burton, it's when she discovered that he already had a drawing of Edward Scissorhands way before they even met. Tim Burton had this weird idea, and so he drew him out on a piece of paper while he was in high school. Then after clicking and rewriting the script, Thompson and Burton both went through a couple of actors interested in the role. Yet most of the actors turned it down once they realized they may look like a gimp for half of the film. During casting, Johnny Depp wasn't the first choice for the film, and it wasn't until Burton and Thompson started to watch Depp act shy and wary of everyone on set. Then they made their decision who would be the lead.
I'll never forget it. He walked in, he's very shy, and he kind of was looking around for us, and I just saw these eyes looking around, these big, gentle doe eyes, and Tim and I just looked at each other like, that's him,
That's my family. Now, come along, dear, and I'll show you the rest of the house.
They were lucky too, since Depp was dating Winona Ryder, who played Kim, and the chemistry they had together was able to be transferred to the big screen. One of the major hurdles they had to overcome would be puppeteering of Edward's hands. Due to the scissors being so large and being in the leather costume, extremely hot and sometimes even agonizing, but he was able to persevere through the production, and he, along with Burton, created a very interesting tale of Beauty and the Beast.
Hit it, boys.
And with the final film, we shall capstone our Tim Burton binge with a lovely Corpse Bride. This is what almost everyone thinks of when they hear the words Tim Burton, and I can't blame them. This film is genuinely fun, yet sad at the same time. Again, I won't give a play-by-play. I'll more or less be going over what I thought had the most artistic value. For example, all the characters are unique. They may have a similar body type, the extras, but each main and supporting character has a very distinct look, except for Victor and Victoria. They have weirdly similar names and looks. I mean, I'm not saying they're related, but maybe a bit of projection, who knows? Now, Emily the Corpse Bride and anyone dead, on the other hand, shows how they died through the way their bodies were designed. Some have skeletal arms and fleshy legs, while some characters are completely dismembered, along with some of the skin tone of a lot of the characters. The ones who have died of the cold are often very deep blue. Just look at Mayhew, Emily, and a variety of other people. They look as if they've gotten their chest blown out. And those are very interesting details. Now, the scenes I want to point out with pure German Expressionism would be the forest wedding reenactment, Remains of the Day, and When the Dead Are Amongst the Living.
There's an eye in me soup.
The setting of the forest is reminiscent of skeletons surrounding Victor as he tries to recite his lines.
I will cut your...
Emphasis on try. Once he places the ring upon Emily's finger, that's when shadows are elongated and frightening, along with how creepy Emily was while they transport to the land of the dead. Just appearing and disappearing, calling out his name. That's very creepy. Once there, shadows help tell the story of how Emily eloped with a familiar stranger and wound up being the remains of the day. The improv jazz solos from each instrument show what would be bodily horror to play music in a very groovy way. By the end of the song, where it reaches its climax, the shadows emphasize how Emily died, where everything turned black. This is very reminiscent of the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Lastly, when the dead are amongst the living, the scene plays out with a slow draw to quote-unquote scare the audience. Well, they're more or less scaring the family that's attending the wedding of Lord Barkis and Victoria. And after the initial scare from Bone Jangles, once everyone is outside, the green shadows of the dead turn back to a very calm and chill blue, showing that the dead are accepted for who they are due to being deceased loved ones or friends when they were alive.
Gertrude!
Helfried? Oh, you've been dead for 15 years.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
However, the very last scene I would like to discuss would be the final scene. And this isn't much of a spoiler, but once the main conflict is over, Emily then shows the audience how beautiful moving on is. And once free, Emily then disappears into the night, finally moving on after so many years of purgatory in the land of the living. And this leads us to the conclusion of the Macabe. Look, I can go on for hours on end talking about the career and films Tim Burton has created, and I should, honestly. There's so much I can cover, but that would take a series of videos to make, or one huge video. Who knows? My point is, Tim Burton has a way to capture the haunting beauty of unordinary people and places in his feature-length films. Not only has German Expressionism left an impact on Burton, but the likes of Edgar Allan Poe, Christopher Lee, and Vincent Price have also created the director we know today. I want to end this with a quote from Burton. If you ever have that feeling of loneliness, of being an outsider, it never quite leaves you. You can be happy or successful or whatever, but that thing stays with you. And after thinking about it for some time, each main character in his films has some form of loneliness. The Doctor from Doctor of Doom lives alone in a faraway castle with only his monster that could be awakened by music. Vincent Malloy is a tormented soul yearning to be Vincent Price by wallowing in his mind. Yeah, like that's gonna work. But with Victor Frankenstein, he watched his dog die. Even though he came back, there's still a hint of sadness in him. In the feature-length films Tim Burton has created, Pee Wee Herman is often alone in the world, and for the briefest amount of time in the beginning, there was pure silence. And from how I saw it, Pee Wee was frightened by the screaming sound of silence. You know, before he made goofy faces and unhealthy breakfast, of course. But think about Emily from The Corpse Bride. She was killed on her wedding night, lost for years in the snow, waiting for someone to marry her, just so that she can go back to the afterlife. Imagine that, being stuck under mud and snow for years on end, unable to move on, and when you do, your husband doesn't love you. And he wants to go back to the place that you were trapped forever. That's not purgatory. That is hell. Lastly, Edward Scissorhands. I mean, what else is there to say? He's trapped in a castle, forever making snow in the winter, or being shut up in a tower by himself for what may seemingly be forever, since he was originally a robot. I mean, I don't mean to end the video on a rather somber note, but my point is, Tim Burton has been able to create a consistent theme throughout his films over the course of 40 years. By utilizing the emotional and visual atmosphere of German Expressionism, Burton has been able to bring out what many people have experienced over the last decade. Or I'm just projecting in this video essay. See ya!